Today's class will be an introduction to this new topic. And we will do this introduction through a text that was written by Frantz Fanon in 1952. It was originally published in French, and the book is called Black Skin, White Masks. And what you have read for today is an excerpt of the first chapter. Frantz Fanon was a post-colonial thinker, an anti-colonial thinker. He was a philosopher, a psychiatrist, and also a critical thinker. I want you to reflect on this because this is a text that was not written by a linguist, by a social linguist, or by a linguistic anthropologist, but by a philosopher who, however, decides to start his book on anti-colonialism with language, reflecting on language, because he realizes how important it is. He starts the text you have read with this very suggestive sentence in which he says that to speak is to exist absolutely for the other. And I say very suggestive because it directly transports us to the social dimension of language that we have been exploring so far. The social dimension of language, of which you have already read about in, for example, Bakhtin. You remember the Russian thinker who was talking about the dialogical nature of language and how in language we always need a speaker, but also a listener. There is always an other in language and in communication. Fanon here continues with this idea and explains to us how when we speak, we are always situating ourselves socially in front of the other. He goes on to say that to speak a language, a concrete language, is to support the weight of a civilization, because that language already possesses a world expressed inside it. This again connects a lot to the idea by Bakhtin. If you remember, that words have their own socially charged life, because words have a historical life full of previous uses of that word before we use it for our first time. He moves on then to what is the main argument in this chapter, that the negro of the Antilles, the original word he uses in French is the noir, so the negro of the Antilles will be proportionately whiter, that is, will come closer to being a real human being in direct ratio to his mastery of the French language. He's doing here a very deep critique on the understanding of languages of colonizer regions as languages of intelligence, languages of wisdom, and also languages of whiteness. He contributes to this idea by saying that in France, when one says something really clever or one speaks super well, we say he talks like a book. But in Martinique, when one talks like that, we say he talks like a white man. See how the construction of colonial language implies that the language of the colonizer is the one that is attached to intelligence, wisdom, speaking well, and much more other things, such as being white. And again, the construction of whiteness is related and completely connected to speaking that certain language, and not the language of the colonized people. He continues saying that he wants to show why the negro of the Antilles always has to face the problem of language, this problem of language of which I'm telling you about. And not only the Black person from the Antilles, but every colonized man has to face this problem of language. Every colonized man, which he defines as every people in whose soul an inferiority complex has been created by the death and burial of its local cultural originality, finds itself face to face with the language of the civilizing nation. And what happens then? The colonized people's native languages, in this case Creole, starts being associated with completely the opposite, not intelligence, not whiteness, not power, not wisdom, not doesn't deserve to be heard. So people start rejecting their own native language, for example, at school, where it's not used in education. Remember, this text was written in 1952. Now some things have changed. However, other things have not. So he explains how in certain families, they don't even speak Creole anymore in Martinique because they want to ascribe themselves to all of the ideologies connected to speaking French, to speaking the language of the colonizers. And he ends up quoting a poem that was written with another Caribbean thinker and poet called Leon Damas, who is also from another French colony in the Caribbean. And in this part of the poem, the mother is saying to her child, "Shut up, I told you you must speak French, the French of France, the Frenchman's French, French French." Okay, so in the following classes, we will be talking a lot about the relationship between language and race and the role of language in perpetuating racial hierarchies in the US and in other territories. But I wanted to start by reading this text to always keep in our mind colonization as the origin of this reproduction of racial inequalities in connection to language. So thank you very much for watching. See you next class. I hope you enjoyed the text.